Hello and happy Thoughtfully Fit Thursday. I'm Darcy Loma and I'm here with Greg Griffin today. And we're exploring the benefits of stillness. Now, I met Greg years ago when I started floating at Float Madison. And I will say that for my clients and for myself, hitting the pause button to take time away from the emails, the calls, the work, the insanity is hard. As a matter of fact, stillness is one of the top 6 practices of being thoughtfully fit. It's all about quieting your mind. And I found Greg because I was realizing that I'm not good at creating stillness just on my own. I need some structures. I need things on my calendar to help support me to step away. And that's one of the things that floating does. So some of you might be watching and saying, wait, what is floating? What are you talking about? So Greg, I would love to, but before we get into like what exactly is floating, I want to ask you, how did you come up with this idea to open this cool, awesome business in downtown Madison? And welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Darcy. It's been great kind of getting to know you over the last few years. And yeah, I mean, I got into floating because I heard about it. It sounded really cool, relaxing, and just good for things that I wanted to do for myself, which the big part of it was slowing down. I really wanted to get into meditating more, and I just couldn't discipline myself enough to have my own meditation practice at home. And I heard that floating was kind of like what I call now meditation on rocket fuel. So this was 7 years ago now, and the closest place to float was in Chicago. I live in Madison. Closest place was Chicago. So we made the round trip, me and my girlfriend, both loved it. We hung out in Chicago, of course, for a couple of days and did other things, but it was based around that float. And after that first float, I just felt like the most calm I'd ever been. And I'm not that I'm a really high anxious person, but I'm definitely used to be a lot more high energy and just always thinking about things and slightly anxious, perhaps, just, not diagnosed as having anxiety. And it just really helped me slow down. And I kind of got a sense after that first float of how nice it could be to do that on a regular basis, but there was just nowhere to do it around here. And so fast forward 3 years after that first float, going down there every once in a while. I also floated a couple of times while traveling to other parts of the country. But it was, maybe 2 to 3 times a year. And each float just felt like a nice reset for both my body and my mind. And just getting tired of driving down to Chicago to float and wanting to do it more, I finally figured out, okay, let's figure out how to get my own float tank. They're expensive. Let's maybe start a business with it. Of course, it's a whole nother journey for another day to talk about. But it was based on necessity. I wanted to float more, so I created the business here, which also allowed other people to be able to do it as well. So
I'm so happy you did, because I used to float. There was a place in Wanakee 20 years ago, and they closed down, and there was nothing. But I never drove to Chicago or anywhere else to find it. And I find it's interesting that you say in that first float you loved it, because for me it took it probably took 6 floats before I really enjoyed it. Do you have people who come in and are like, what's, I don't get it. I didn't see any benefit.
So, yeah, I mean, one of the biggest things I try to convince people, I guess, is to, for one, not make floating a bucket list item. Like, yes, a float can be really nice, one of the most relaxing things you might ever do. You might get into a nice, deep meditative state, but most people who come and float don't have a regular meditation practice. They're coming in for maybe pain relief, for, maybe some meditation. The biggest reason is for relaxation and stress relief. And so we have an introductory 3-pack because we really want to get people to try their first float spread over the course of 3 floats instead of just one. I had an amazing first float. We get quite a few people that do have a really amazing first float, but I'd say most people kind of fall into the middle where they feel really relaxed afterwards, but they at least get a sense of, oh, I can see how this gets better, after doing it 2-3 times and maybe making it a practice. So, and then of course we have the opposite where once in a while someone comes out and they don't get it. They maybe floating's not for them, they say, and we have a little quick discussion, and pretty much everyone seems to leave with the sense of, okay, I can definitely see why you'd want to try that a couple times, kind of like riding a bike or doing yoga or working out. The first time you do a yoga session, you're kind of watching around the room. You might be nervous. Am I doing things right? And then over the course of doing it a few more times, you just get better at it. Same with riding a bike, same with working out. It usually takes a few sessions to really break in and start to see what it's all about, even though you might get some physical and mental benefits, even that first float.
Absolutely. And I know people can go and watch videos and see, but I'd love to hear what are the mental and physical benefits of floating. With Thoughtfully Fit, it's a playoff of being physically fit. And we know it's important to have not only a strong mind, but also a strong body. One of the things I love about floating is that it is a dual benefit. Before we get, though, to the benefits of floating, for those people who are watching going, what is it? Can you just give a short description, and then we can send some links where they can watch videos to see more?
Sure. So floating today, most people that float are going to be doing it at commercial float centers. There are some people that have float tanks in their house, but because cost of buying a float cabin or float pod or float tank, there's different names for the device that you're in and floating, most people end up floating at a commercial float center. So we're sort of set up like a massage studio. You come in, there's a lobby space, reception area. We have a nice relaxation room for afterwards. And then we have the float suites. So each float suite is private. There's a lock on the door. You go in there. The first time you come in, we'll give you an orientation showing you how everything works. It only takes about 10 minutes. Each private float suite has a shower, a little changing area. So you strip down, you shower quick, you get in, and it's hard to describe how large they actually are. The pictures online really don't do it justice. There are some videos where you can see people getting into them to get a better idea of the space, but pretty much everyone that comes in is pleasantly surprised by how large these actually are. It's not like a tanning bed where the lid is right on your face. There's a lot of space above you. And I know you, Darcy, you like doing our bigger cabin where it's actually 8 feet tall. So you step into it and you're standing up completely before you slowly sit down and lay back. And each float tank, is what I like to call them, has about 10.5 inches of water with about 1,000 pounds, 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt dissolved into it. So the salt is there to create weightlessness. So you lay back, and because there's so much salt, it's so high in salinity, it's sort of like the Dead Sea where everyone floats. You don't have to know how to float in a lake or a pool. You don't have to know how to swim. Because of that salt, you're going to float. So half your body is under that salt water solution. The other half, your face and everything, is above in the air. We heat them to the temperature of the average person's skin, so about 94 degrees, so your external body temperature. And we do that so after maybe 5 or so minutes, you shouldn't really feel much of a temperature difference as well. And then inside, there's a button to control the lighting. You can turn it off. Some people do like to leave it on. You can kind of ease into turning it off if you'd like. And same with the music. There's options for the music. And so it used to be called sensory deprivation many years ago when it was first invented. I prefer to call it float therapy or floating. Just, it sounds a bit nicer. And you're
or an isolation tank. Is that a name too? Or yeah,
isolation tank is what people at one point called them as well, and some people still know them as that. I like float therapy. It sounds nicer. Sensory deprivation sounds like, maybe you're torturing yourself, but, floating is so relaxing that it's weird to even have that connotation to it. So with the music and the lights and the temperature, what you're really doing is trying to remove as much external stimuli as possible. We also don't really like to use any scents in here. So like our shampoos and things are unscented. So you're basically kind of really reducing sense of smell, touch, of course, taste. You're not eating in there. And really what it allows your mind to do sort of effortlessly is to induce meditative states. So it really slows down the nervous system. Your blood pressure can be dropping in there as well to a safe level. And that's where a lot of those stress and relaxation benefits come from, because you're removing that external stimuli in a safe and comfortable space.
Yes, and I have gone to different nutritionists, my triathlon coach, my holistic practitioner, reflexology, and there is so much benefit of Epsom salt, of magnesium, of salt in our body. And when they were telling me to go home and soak my feet, I'm like, well, if that's good for me, I want to maximize everything, right? Then I could soak my whole body. And it is this, for those of you who haven't done it, what Greg just described from a user standpoint, when I go in, I will ask Greg to keep the music on usually for about 12 minutes. And I have trained myself now where in the floating room that I go in, there's like stars on the front, on the top, and then there's different like light blue colored light on the bottom. I turn both of those off. That took me years to feel comfortable to be in complete darkness. And then when the music goes off, my body temperature, the air temperature, the water temperature, I can't tell where my body starts and where the water ends and where the air, and it's just the most relaxing experience ever. I float at least once a month. And the last 2 times I went in with an intention of trying to have a breakthrough and really process my keynote. Not anything I'm thinking about, but just holding that lightly. And both times I came out and I called Jill and I'm like, oh, I got something. It's like, because all of the other stimulus is taken away, it just is the most relaxing. I mean, it really truly is a place to quiet your mind. So you already, as you were sharing what floating is, you touched on a whole bunch of benefits. Let me just have you maybe recap what maybe either what you find your clients and customers say are the benefits, or what the research says.
Sure, yeah. So floating, I'll mention, it has been around actually since 1954, which I think surprises a lot of people. But really the resurgence of it has come in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. And there was a bit of research done back in the 80s, and some of that stuff you can find online. A lot of the more recent research is very exciting. Last, I want to say 5 or 6 years, since 2015, they actually built a float research clinic at the country's largest private brain research facility in the US. It's down in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they've been focusing there on mental health. So they've had a couple of studies published so far, one in PubMed and then one in a slightly more obscure journal, Science Direct. And their studies were on anxiety and depression. At some point, they're looking to expand those into PTSD and other mental health disorders, eating disorders as well, anorexia nervosa. And so these studies that are published now are really exciting. The place you can find all of the studies, clinicalflotation.com. And that website was actually sparked and put together by the director who started that the float clinic at the Brain Research Center. And I'll really quickly just mention that on their first study they did on anxiety with 50 participants, they found that every single one of them had a reduction in anxiety pre-float versus post-float against the control group, where they had some people, even in the control group, anxiety increased because of the control. So, as far as why people float, I'd say the biggest reasons people come in here and float at other places is general stress relief and relaxation. And then beyond that, the meditation benefits kind of fall into that same camp, as well as the mental health benefits, I'm sure you've heard, and a lot of your listeners out there have heard that, meditation itself is great for the mind, for reducing stress, for possibly things like anxiety, PTSD, depression. And floating just kind of helps you get into those states a little bit quicker and easier because you're in a relaxing, warm environment and you're removing a lot of that external stimuli and distractions that you might have while meditating. The other side of things, which Darcy, you did mention, is the physical benefits. So muscle tension, that's actually something they were looking at during the anxiety studies, were how people's muscle tension. They found that muscle tension went down during the 60-minute float during these studies. And it's really big in the athletic world. I want it. Almost all the NFL teams, I think, now have float tanks in their training facility. We actually used to float quite a few of the UW Badger football team here back when we first opened. And long story short, they have float tanks down there now at Camp Randall for the football team. Wow. The Cubs, they got a float pod the year they won the World Series, about 6 months prior. So that's saying something, I think. Not that you have to be a professional athlete, but really big in athletic recovery. And also part of that is kind of mental preparations for the games, kind of like what you mentioned with your breakthroughs. Some people have this idea that, with floating, you have to quiet the mind, you have to get into meditative states, but every float can be a little bit different. And you can go in there with an intention to, think some things through if you want. Sometimes your mind just might be wandering, so you're able to kind of sort some thoughts and ideas out while you're in there. And then sometimes you might just want to quiet the mind. Some people even fall asleep because there's so much salt, you're going to still stay afloat in there. I'll last quickly touch on, again, back to physical benefits. We get a lot of people that have chronic pain, things like fibromyalgia is a big reason why people float. Some of our fibromyalgia patients or clients say that during the float, at least, no pain. Some of them mention not having pain for days afterwards, which is just really awesome to hear. I've had people cry after their float because this is the first time I haven't had pain in years, and it's super cool to see that.
That is wonderful to hear. I'm blessed to not have chronic pain, and yet the physical benefit, there's the benefit of that hour that I'm in floating, but when I come out, there are times when my body, I don't even know how to describe it. It's heavy in the most wonderful way. It's just like, and I just feel calm and at peace. It's hard to describe. And every float's different. Sometimes I fall asleep. Sometimes I've got that spark and it's, and I'm getting excited and I got to get out and right away write things down. And sometimes it's just this deeply meditative state. Yeah.
For you, quick. We mentioned the 60-minute part of it, and I could say 60 minutes is nothing. For some people it sounds like a long time, but how is it for you, that 60 minutes?
Now, I love it, and it's like that. As I said in the first, probably I don't remember because it was 20 years ago, but it probably took me like 6 floats because I'm very active, very, like I want to do. I'm working on that, trying to be more and step into more stillness and quieting the mind. So I was like, what am I supposed to be doing? I was just sort of agitated. I didn't know. And I was scared because I didn't want to turn the lights off. And then I thought, well, if I don't, I'm not getting the full benefit. So I was playing all these mind games. And so sometimes that hour in the beginning felt long, and I'd sit up and I'd stretch and I'd do stuff. Now, since then, in the last multiple years, I don't care what my experience is, that hour is glorious.
Yep, I agree. Thanks for sharing that. So yeah.
So where can people learn more? Or if they want to come in and check it out, if they happen to be here in Madison, I've got people that are listening all over the country. So I think this is getting a lot more popular, that they can probably Google and find a flotation center where they are. But if they want to come and experience Float Madison. Sure.
Yeah. I'll quickly say, if you're listening somewhere else in the country, go float at your local float center. There's lots of great spots out there, and across the world, there's I want to say around 500 now in the US and another 500 to 1,000 elsewhere in the world. So it's definitely a lot easier to find a float center now than there was 20 years ago when you were floating. And so if you're in Madison, we're floatmadison.com, nice and easy. We are downtown, but I like to say we're on the quieter part of downtown over by John Nolan. So, not on the campus side, State Street side, we're on the quieter side, and we do have free parking on site here.
That's wonderful. And if you go to floatmadison.com, you'll see some of the packages, and Greg makes it really easy to check it out, so that you can invest in yourself and your stillness and quieting your mind. Thank you so much for being here, Greg. Thank you for opening this business. When I went 20 years ago, it was actually in the basement of a couple. These two women had 2 float tanks in their basement up in Wanakee. And so to come and have a beautiful lobby and a beautiful space to meditate before and afterwards, and have the full experience instead of feeling like I'm walking through their living room. This is weird. And their dog, do I pet their dog? Right. So I just will personally say thank you for opening this business for those of us who need you.
You're welcome. And I'll say I'm actually a little envious that you got to experience that. They closed down the year before I heard of floating and moved out of state. So I'm actually kind of envious that you got to experience the earlier days of floating where it was back in people's houses. So thank you for your kind words, and thanks for coming in here and spreading the good word that floating is. So I appreciate you as well.
Absolutely. And I will close by giving a shout out to Vicki Selko, because she is the one who way back when in the 90s said, you got to try this, Darcy. And she put up with me when after every float, I'm like, Vicki, this is horrible. I don't get it. What am I supposed to be doing? And she helped me. She's like, keep going, keep going. So sure. Thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Darcy. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. All right. Take everybody. Your homework is to go find some stillness, quiet your mind, whether it's floating or meditating or just going for a walk in nature. Appreciate you. We'll see you next Thursday. Take care.